Every day we interact with built environments, but never pause to think how they got there. Urban planning is the design and regulation of land use in order to enhance the physical, economic, and social characteristics of an urban environment. I studied urban planning at Texas A&M, which is nationally ranked #2 in urban planning according to collegeaffordabilityguide.org. Today I will inform you of the history and necessity of urban planning in the United States. So how did urban planning come to be? The cause of urban planning was because of the national population growth. That's one of them. Another is immigration. The national population growth. Natural increase of births and decrease of deaths in the United States. According to Haynes, the population grew from 4.5 million in 1790 to over 114 million in 1920, an average growth rate of 2.5% per year. In immigration between 1900 and 1915, more than 15 million immigrants arrived in the United States. That's on average 1 million immigrants per year. Another reason for urban planning was improved transportation. The railroad, steamship, and automobile, all three innovations allowed for the mobility of people and product. That was allowed for cities to move from the coast to the interior. No longer were they dependent on those waterways. It also allowed for cities to specialize and integrate economies. So one city could focus on one product and another on a different product, and they were able to trade and create commerce. Now that we see where urban planning comes from, what made urban planning so relevant? The rise of planning started with the decentralization and urbanization of cities. Until the mid-1900s, urban areas were, most of the population were living in central cities. The introduction of the automobile just a couple years later changed this, when now people were able to live outside the city and move and go inside for work. Another reason was for the role of government. The city land use and zoning regulations. These zoning laws now did not allow for plants to be right next to apartment complexes. It separated industry from industrial from residential. Although these zoning regulations did have impacts on the inner cities and suburbs. In the inner cities, it reduced density but increased the cost of land and housing development, and it encouraged housing development to move outside of the city. The impacts on the suburbs is that it restricted location of lower cost housing in segregated neighborhoods. You now did not have neighbors being poor and rich. You now had neighborhoods full of rich people and neighborhoods full of poor people, and this created issues in that. Urban planning is in our everyday lives, and we can see it constantly evolving to something new. So what does urban planning look like today? First, you have planning and zoning. Many cities will have a comprehensive map, and they encourage developers to follow this comprehensive map so that you have a safe, healthy city for the people that live in it. And then you also have land developers. So land development is usually done privately. Some companies in Houston, maybe Johnson Development, Midway companies, and Caldwell companies. According to Thomas Baskman, commercial real estate is a robust contributor to our national and state economies. So what does our future hold in this? By 2030, 60% of humans will live inside cities, according to Resilient Cities. And then there are 4 scenarios that the future holds for our cities. You have collapse, you have ruralized cities, you have divided cities, and last you have resilient cities. So the future can be scary with all these words that I'm throwing at you, but if we remember the roots of planning, we can look forward to resilient cities. Now, in conclusion, urban planning is not the most well-known part of society, but it is important to the shaping of the environment and the culture that we live in. Urban planning began with the increase of the population, but it will move into the direction of becoming a necessary part of a successful society.